This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
If you think Demon Knight is too gross and yucky, thank you.
Hello and welcome to the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. Gil will be with us momentarily. First things first, the nudgy part, where like Colonel Cathcart in Catch-22, I ask you to please like us. If you're on our YouTube channel or our blog or anywhere there's a like button near our content, please hit it. In this here virtual world, it matters a ton. So does subscribing, so please do that too. Okay, nudge hat off, storyteller hat on. 30 years ago in 1994, Gil and I co-produced the now classic horror movie Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight. The movie opened on Friday, January 13th, 1995. As often happens in the movie business, as producers, we fired the original writers, VORIS and ETHAN REIFF, from the project. 30 years later, Cy and Ethan will finally get their chance to fire back at being fired. Now, Cy and Ethan's script was terrific. That's why we bought it. But the script wasn't written to be a Crypt-branded movie, so it wasn't the script's fault or the writer's fault that the script wasn't Crypt enough. The point of the exercise for us wasn't just to put out a movie with Crypt's name on it. The point was to put out a movie redolent of Crypt's brand. Gil and I didn't just produce the show, we reinvented it, the Crypt Keeper and the Crypt brand itself. We wrote a lot of the scripts. I wrote every damned word the Crypt Keeper said. And Gil directed some of the best episodes of the whole run. We were really the only people qualified to turn a non-Crypt movie script into a Crypt one. And so when time came after Cy and Ethan had written a number of drafts, trying to accommodate an impossible task for them to be us, we fired them from the movie, unceremoniously, impersonally, the way almost every writer or writing team gets fired from a movie. Now, that doesn't do anything to assuage the horrible feelings that come with being fired. I know from experience myself. Cy and Ethan were understandably and rightfully angry. Now, because Gil and I put a lot of legitimate work into the script, and because we alone wrote the lengthy Crypt Keeper wraparounds, we sought shared credit for the screenplay. That also would have meant Cy and Ethan sharing the residuals with us. In the end, that's been pretty lucrative. Well, Cy and Ethan were angry at us before for firing them, our going for credit and the residuals, that really pissed them off. In the end, Gil and I lost the credit and residuals battles. Cy and Ethan regarded us not merely as assholes, but as carpetbagging assholes too. Such is Hollywood. But in Hollywood, fired writers never get to fire back at being fired, except to other writers, their social circles, and of course the therapists. Payback for writers? Not on this planet, Hollywood. Good thing this ain't Hollywood, it's the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. And here we laugh at Hollywood's rules. In fact, sometimes we chortle at them. With that in mind, and with Demon Knight's 30th anniversary coming at us next year like a goddamn demon, we thought it was time to bury the hatchet, even if it's in us. Hey, if you're a fan of Demon Knight, you don't want to miss this. It's a very real piece of the behind-the-scenes Demon Knight story happening in real time. Will it finally bring this circle to a close? Hey, no spoiler alerts needed. I wouldn't dare ruin the twist ending for you.
Courting in progress. At least you guys let the participants know about that. So
That's the voice of ETHAN REIFF.
Exactly. It's like
the
Nixon tapes.
And the voice of VORIS.
It's only because the law makes us.
yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, we have experience with that from long ago when we first went to DreamWorks to discuss Kung Fu Panda, and they alerted us that everything being said would be recorded, which ended up being a good thing because then those recordings were used to defend DreamWorks in the lawsuit brought by a couple of maniacs who said that they had come up with the idea.
Wow, interesting.
We will
not to derail the demon.
No. Hey,
no, that is interesting.
We will come to all of this. We will come to, because
Not if our discussion is limited to from now until 5 p.m. We won't, Al.
I have until 5 p.m. with you?
No, that's what it said on the email.
That's on the
Yeah,
thing.
from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. So
hey, do you believe everything you read? Don't you live in rewrites like the rest of us?
Al, you
call me an ingenue supervillain.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Al, you look like Lex Luthor since we last saw you.
Yeah, I already tread all that ground, but without the specific comic book reference.
But now we're actually being recorded, Ethan. So see,
so I think I was being recorded when I said that earlier. Actually,
I don't know.
You know, I never thought
you weren't here.
I never thought of that about Alan until you mentioned it. It does look like a villain.
I have finally achieved my
wait. Wait a second. Gil, hasn't he looked like a villain to you for decades?
Not at all. Not at all.
As if, my God, I wish I had looked like something other than what I look like. But that's a whole nother story. We're not even here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you two guys and how you have managed to remain a creative partnership for how long is it as of this year?
Is that what we're here to talk about?
Well, it is a part of really what I want to talk about, because I truly, we
weren't that successful.
Yeah, I mean, Gil and I began in exactly the same way, and then we broke up. Now we've reconnected again, and we're beginning to create again. But that was after a 25-year hiatus where we did not talk to each other.
I think it might be about 37 years, which is crazy. Something
is it 85 or 86?
No, it's neither of those. It's like we met in 86 and we really started working like 87. So 87 is, I believe, 37.
Well, okay. This is exactly where I wanted to pick up to start the conversation.
About how two partners who have lived the same experience have striking different memories. With me and Cy, the striking differences are usually only about dates on a calendar, because Cy often likes to talk about how he believes in narrative truth and that the truth is like the essence as it should be in a story, whereas I believe in simple factual truth.
And I actually stand by that statement.
but you see, those are two very complementary ways to approach it. So you're never really stepping on each other. You're really filling in where the other doesn't necessarily.
I mean, in the context of storytelling, that would be true. In the context of a historical narrative, I would take issue. But, c'est la vie. Or c'est la cinema.
I will say this, ironically, and maybe my memory's wrong, Ethan, but ironically, because of this podcast that we're on, the very first thing that Ethan and I collaborated on was in fact Demon Knight.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And where were you guys when you did that? Were you in LA already, or were you somewhere else?
No. The long story.
Well, you guys met.
Story,
you
Mr.
guys were,
Adler.
Well, you guys were both at NYU, but you did not meet at NYU. You met at a party after NYU, and you both discovered you had screenplays that you were writing separately.
Almost perfect. You seem to have consulted our Wikipedia page, but you misquoted one specific detail, which is we met at a graduation party, which was held while actually, you know what? You're only half wrong, because I was still a senior, but Cy, who was 1 year ahead of me, had graduated the year before, but we had a mutual friend who was in my class, but had worked with Cy at like the copy center at NYU.
And my greatest moment at the NYU Copy Center was showing Stephen King to the bathroom. He came in for some symposium or something and couldn't find the men's room. I was like,
I've heard that story before, and I'm always shocked that NYU Film School in 1986, or I guess earlier, 1985 or something, or 4, invited Stephen King to give some talk, because
it wasn't the film school, it was broader, because
that makes more sense.
Center, it was all NYU. Right.
So it was some other institution inside the university. It was not the Tisch School of the Arts film program, because Stephen King just represented much too much of a mainstream commercial-minded storytelling sensibility at that time for
NYU. Yes.
What would you say, or did you get anything for NYU? Would you say your college education brought anything to your table?
You know, I would say the most valuable and significant thing my film school / college education brought to me was the networking relationship aspect, which obviously in my specific case, the biggest thing was it led to the relationship with Cy, which led to, you know, Cy had some success in his own individual aspiring filmmaker lifespan before we became a going institution. And I did the same, but all of the somewhat, you know, legit level of success that we've had in our careers came as a partnership, and we would never have been partners if we hadn't both gone to NYU film school, you know. And aside before I let him give his side, the other thing I'll say is I did learn some stuff about filmmaking. I don't know that I learned a tremendous amount. I was obviously not everybody, but the lion's share of the students, like myself and Cy, were film maniacs or film geeks or whatever you want to call it. So you know, I think I knew something about filmmaking, but I learned some more.
Do you remember? All right, so you came into NYU. You approached your.
But wait, you should let Cy answer about.
Al, let me just say, just to answer the same question, I would say, agreeing with what Ethan said, but also saying that in addition to the networking, I think, you know, I always felt film school. A lot of people badmouth it or poo-poo it, but I felt like you got out of it what you put into it, because essentially your full-time job for 4 years was to basically watch movies and make movies. So you had this opportunity, and so if you took advantage of it, I think you got a lot out of it. I would also say that when Ethan and I eventually got to run our own television series, we called on a lot of those skill sets that we had learned in film school: editing, post-production, music, photography. At least for me, I felt like, oh, okay, I know how to do this. This is what I did for 4 years at NYU. So
there's an element of truth to that. But at the same time, there was like a decade or more between when we, a little more than a decade between when we graduated and when we made our first TV show. And I think we kept working on and improving all those skills I just referred to. We didn't do it at the feature film level for the most part, because we didn't direct or edit or shoot feature, you know, as the director of photography, feature films, but we both did various, like Cy worked for a while as an editor and I worked as an assistant cameraman, and we were both around whatever, extreme low budget independent productions I was an assistant director for a while. So it's not like we were hermetically sealed. And when our TV opportunity showed up and we were on the set, we had a flashback to our college experience for all of those skills, you know.
Take us. I want to go before your college experience. You said you arrived as a film maniac. So film was always a passion. It was always.
Yeah. I think that's the case for both of us. And since I've been talking so much, I'll let Cy take that one to start.
No, yeah, I always talk to my kids about how when I grew up, and Ethan's in the same age range, you know, if you went to see a movie, and
slightly younger, but
yeah, there you go, and you loved the movie, you basically had to go see it in the theater over and over and over again. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it again for several years until it came on television.
With commercials.
Yes, with commercials. And in some cases, the movie was ruined. I remember trying to watch The Wild Bunch on television, and it was incomprehensible because they had to cut so much violence out of it that the movie was just it was like an Eisensteinian experience.
Yeah, your dad didn't take you to see The Wild Bunch when it was theatrical.
No, but this is my point.
Right, you tried to watch it on TV the first time. That would have been amazing, because you'd have been like a 5-year-old kid watching The Wild Bunch.
When it first came on, but I had known about it, and I wanted to see it. None of my parents would take me to see it, but it was like, okay, finally, and it was just like a disaster. But yeah, no, we were both, and I was also a TV junkie, I think it's funny that we ended up doing both TV and movies, because I remember thinking when I was a kid, like the greatest thing, like I really wanted to make movies, but I was also like, wow, if I could make an episode of Starsky and Hutch, that would be great too, you know? So I may have been more of a TV junkie than Ethan, but we were both film junkies.
I was a TV junkie also, just with very particular, you know, niches of what I was into. But yeah.
Do you remember the first movie you ever saw?
I know the first movie I ever saw, which is like extremely appropriate since I was really young, which was A Man Called Flintstone, actually. which is actually, I mean, it's a pretty damn good movie. I think I haven't seen it in a long time, but I imagine it would hold up.
I don't remember the first movie I saw, but I remember the first movie that made a real impression on me.
That was my next question.
Well, this movie it was as sold as a kid's movie. And then years later, I found out what it really was. There was a Czechoslovakian movie from the 1950s called The Journey to the Beginning of Time that was re-released, dubbed, and slightly re-edited in the 70s as a kid's movie on Saturday matinees. And I went to see this movie because it had dinosaurs, it had stop motion effects, puppet effects. It was this group of kids that travel down this river and slowly go to essentially to the beginning of time. I remember when they get to the end of the movie, not knowing it, now it makes perfect sense. It's this Eastern Bloc Czechoslovakian movie from the 50s. The beginning of time is just this gray beach, this sort of wasteland. There's like nothing. There's just this gray overcast water. And I remember it being just depressing and weird and strange and surreal. And again, it was marketed as a kid's movie in the 70s. And I just walked out of the theater like absolutely like profoundly shaken to my core by this crazy movie. And again, only several decades later did I realize what this movie actually was. Now you can actually watch it. Now you can get, I think Criterion released a Blu-ray or something. Now you can actually watch the original Czechoslovakian version of this movie.
What is the point of that ending?
Well, you get to the beginning of time, and it's
nothing. All right.
It's like nothing.
The point is, when you live in a Stalinist society,
exactly,
you question the whole point of life itself. You know,
well, I think the colorized version of it still shows it in grays and black.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Movies that left like a big mark on me when I was a kid and I saw them, like the first Planet of the Apes. I remember, you know, that's one of the first movies that, like, I don't know if I would say blew my mind, but just was incredible, and just in a lot of different ways. And then the ending, you know, and the more I would watch it over the years, the more I would appreciate it more, you know, like it holds up and gets better and better every time.
I also love
every time I see it, you know.
Yeah, I also love that movie when I was a kid.
Yeah. It makes a huge impression, Al. That it's funny. I didn't know until actually rather recently that the ending, the last shot with the Statue of Liberty, is at Point Doom.
Oh, that makes sense with the beach, I guess.
Yeah, they shot that at Point Doom, and I only learned that recently, which was, you know, I got married right there at Point Doom at a house right there by Point Doom.
Wow!
Did you pound the sand and curse at the gods at your wedding?
If I had known, I'm still married to the same person, so you know.
No, but
that's cool.
No, but Alan, that makes sense, because at the wedding, I remember looking out towards the beach, and there's a plaque that says this is where the original Statue of Liberty was first placed before they moved it to New York.
Hey, that's like some good Borscht Belt comedy.
Who knew Gil was doing vaudeville still at this point?
Hey, I'll tell you a movie, even though I'm sure you want to get past this point now, but I'll tell you a movie that had a huge, like, that I loved from when I first saw it as a boy, and I still love, and it's still like one of my all-time favorite movies. And what made me think of it was what you just said about Point Doom and the end of the Planet of the Apes, which I never knew that. So thank you for informing us.
I'm glad I could share.
Gunga Din. And I remember coming to LA, and not right away when I got here, but at some point with my wife and the kids going out to Lone Pine and the Alabama hills and seeing the actual locations that they shot as the Northwest frontier, in the Khyber Pass and stuff for Gunga Din. So, which was really cool for me,
When you first, now again, you have anticipated me. This is, God, terrific. Yeah, all right. So the move out to LA, when did you move out as a team? Did you move
No,
out
we moved out
separately?
individually. Cy moved out first while we were still in the struggling, aspiring writer phase of our screenwriting careers. We had a little bit of a taste of success, some low budget success, and then things sort of like dried up. This is in like the early to mid 90s. And then Cy moved out to LA with his wife, and I was back in New York. And while he was sort of lost between the East Coast and the West Coast, I got a call about a job opportunity. And in the years prior to this, we had occasionally come out to LA together to sleep on our manager's floor and either go in for meetings to audition for jobs or actually, work on a job that we had gotten, whatever. And again, that had sort of dried up a bit, even though we still had that same manager. And Cy just decided to take the bull by the horns, and maybe things would change for the better if he came out here as a full-time. And I guess he and his wife wanted to get out of New York, maybe, whatever. And while they were in between, I got this call with this job opportunity. And then
we were driving, my wife and I were driving, and we were around the Grand Canyon. We were driving from the East Coast to LA. And luckily, our car either broke down or got a flat tire or something. And it was a car that had been given to us by my wife's father, my father-in-law. It was like an 87 Toyota Cressida. And we called him because we knew nothing about cars. And he said, "Oh my God, thank God you called. Cy's writing partner, Ethan, called, and apparently you guys have a pitch on Friday or something." And
that's not what he said, because we didn't have a pitch on Friday, but we had like a meeting that we had to try and have to hear about this project or whatever.
Yeah, well, okay. I remember it one way. You're going to get this through the entire.
No, that's obviously if you're writing it as a pitch, that's the way to pitch it, right? You've already got a pitch on the books, and you've got to show up, and you've already got the parts you have to deliver.
This goes back to the initial theme, the key between us, Ethan's literal truth and my narrative truth, which I still subscribe to this day, is shorter, punchier, and more to the point. So anyhow.
And when you're trying to record history for posterity, what really matters? What actually happened, or to make sure it's short, punchy, and to the point?
Well, again,
we leave it for the audience to decide. Of course, the audience
exactly. That's a good point. Let the audience decide.
So let me ask you: was the pitch in LA or in New York?
It was LA, because I was driving to LA, and literally it was like you have to be there.
Already, Gil has subscribed to the pitch as opposed to the meeting or the
What was it? It was
audition.
It's sexier. It's sexier. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was more of a meeting than a pitch, but I had to go in person and meet the director of this potential writing job.
Yeah, which the movie that movie actually got made. We jumped through all the hoops successfully. I flew out to Los Angeles, and then we did the pitch actually together.
We had a good meeting, and then it was like, okay, we want to hear what you guys have to say, etc. It was actually, it's sort of funny. It was a rewrite of a old John Sayles action. It was the only time we'd ever get a chance. I think everybody gets a chance to rewrite John Sayles. It was an old John Sayles action movie that he had obviously written for money, but it was really quite good. But the catch was that Dolph Lundgren was starring in the movie. And the key was John Sayles had the lead character, the Dolph Lundgren character, he had a lot of in-depth monologues and a lot of like soul-searching pages of dialogue. And also there wasn't that much action in it. It was sort of towards the end. So the marching orders.
What is Dolph Lundgren doing in
Okay,
this
but
movie?
the marching orders were, you got to put more action in this project, and you have to create. Dolph was like a mercenary who's involved in some plot shenanigans, and they said you have to create a team of mercenaries, Dirty Dozen style, to surround Dolph, because Dolph is not going to be able to do all this dialogue. He doesn't want to do it. He's not good at it. So it was sort of a fun gig because we got to create all these new characters for the movie, and we got to write all this great action stuff. And actually,
I mean, the one other element was it had been written. I believe it was originally written in the early '80s, early to mid '80s.
Yeah,
and it was basically written as a Vietnam parable. And in the interim, Platoon came out, and a bunch of other movies came out, and the world had turned somewhat, and the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, had been fought, and things had changed, because this is like 1994, probably, 1993, 94. So we just had to sort of like update the general atmosphere and verisimilitude of the story.
But, and I actually ended up doing storyboards, because I used to draw. I did storyboards for the director for a bunch of the action sequences, and it actually got made. It's a pretty good movie. It's one of Dolph's better movies, I think. It's called Men of War.
Dolph Lundgren, Charlotte Lewis. You want a gunfight? Men of War.
It's got a really good cast. B.D. Wong is in it, and
it's got a great cast, actually.
I'm still amazed at the audacity of taking a concept with a John Sayles script, with.
That's Hollywood. That's Hollywood, Al.
Well, I mean, have you ever met Dolph Lundgren?
No.
He's a very smart.
He's actually an incredibly intelligent, sophisticated guy. He comes across on film as, I mean, a little bit like inhuman or alien presence, which is part of the reason, obviously, for him becoming like a cinematic icon for, in one way or another. But in person, like, he's really, really smart, and he's just not, inhuman, but whatever. Yeah, he liked the part, and like Si said, it's gone on to be seen as like one of his better roles and one of his better movies. I mean, movies driven by him as opposed to where he's just.
I had two weird Men of War experiences. And it got released theatrically in Europe. I think that's another reason. Like, if it was a Dimension Miramax movie that was straight to video here, and then they released it theatrically over there. But it's funny. I actually ran into Dolph Lundgren at my gym like 10 years ago, bizarrely enough. And I said, "Hey, Dolph, you probably don't remember me, but my buddy and I wrote Men of War." He said, "Oh my God, that's one of my favorite movies. That's one of the best movies I've made." And he was like, "Yeah, I remember you guys. You guys were from New York." That was this big thing. Is that we were those crazy New York guys.
That's funny, because that reminds me of one of my favorite Dolph Lundgren stories. Not that I have a lot of them, but that's so funny that he said to Si, "Oh, I remember you guys. You're from New York," because he liked the script, which we had written that draft, even though it still said, by us and John Sayles, as it should have. And he had like I don't remember what company had sort of like made the deal with him, but he had like his own, vanity production company, and with a woman running development for him. And he was like, I want you guys to come in and have a meeting, because, you can write something that we'll come up with some project. It'll be great, for us to create something for him to star in after Man of War was done. And I'll always remember going with Si to that meeting and it was a very small office, as I'm sure you guys have experience with, for, depending on the size of the company, the office space is small, right? And me and Si came in, and he was there, and his development, executive woman was there, and they asked us to, pitch them some ideas that we might have that might be appropriate for Dolph. And we launched into, and I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and Cy is originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but he had lived in New York for, I don't know, like a decade as an NYU student. And then after NYU as a, struggling, aspiring screenwriter with me. And we launched into pitching some project. And I'll always remember Dolph Lundgren, who's like 6.5 feet tall and 250 pounds of absolute solid chiseled muscle at the time, very much that's exactly what he was, saying, "Oh, you guys scare me. You're like New York, so much aggressive energy," and it was hilarious.
The other
men killed both of us with like one hand, literally, without
the pen being mightier than the sword.
Yeah, there you go. The other, Ethan, I would say, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. The other Men of War story, which is recent, is I went to a movie theater with my wife to see a 70 millimeter screening of The Untouchables. Oh. And a young actor in The Untouchables who plays Kevin Costner's like neophyte uniformed partner in a few scenes. And it's this guy named Don Harvey. Who had a big part in Men of War. He was one of the mercenaries. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, "Hey, Don, we worked on a movie together, long distance, do you remember Men of War with Tyson?" And he was like, "Oh my God, the craziness we had in Thailand on that movie. It was crazy, man. You should have been."
That's funny. So that leads me to another Men of War memory, which will be the last one that I'll share, because and Don Harvey was a great actor. It's funny, I forgot Don Harvey was in The Untouchables, and that's cool that you got to meet him, see him, and talk to him, because neither Cy nor myself went to Thailand on that production. Although, if Cy wants to, after I tell this story, he can tell another crazy story where the producer tried to basically kidnap him to come to Thailand because he was such a good storyboard artist, and he wanted him to go to Thailand to help keep the visuals.
I don't need to tell this story because Ethan just told the story.
Well, the details make that. Maybe I'll tell it afterwards, whatever. But so we wrote the script, and it was not the first thing we ever wrote that got made, but it was of a higher budget level. It was like a moderately budgeted movie. It was not a low budget movie. I don't know. It probably cost at the time in like 1993 to 94. What did it cost? Like $6 to $10 million, something like that?
6, 7, 8. Yeah.
And being shot entirely on location in Thailand. So
it was shot widescreen. It was like anamorphic. It's shot like cinema.
It was a decent chunk of change. They could afford to actually put some, production value and action on screen, right? So we had written this one action scene at sea, off the beach, off the coast of the island where the entire story, most of the story takes place, with these pirates. And one way or another, there's these villainous pirates are on this boat, and they stole something, or they're doing something, and the heroes fire like anti-tank rocket launcher from their ground infantry weapons kit at this boat, and it like blows up. And we had written in a very specific action description, like you see like one of the pirates on fire flying as he leaps off the exploding ship and into the ocean. And we got the dailies, and we watched the dailies from Thailand on like VHS, I think it was. And we actually saw a Thai extra, and that was a long shot.
Stuntman.
But we saw the Thai stuntman. The explosion goes off, the boat goes up in flames, and a guy leaps off on fire into the water, right? And we're like, holy shit, they really did it. And then we found out that it wasn't supposed to happen that way. Like the guy didn't have like the full body suit, for flame preparation. It was, the explosion was too big, and he was supposed to jump off, I guess, and just be backlit by like the lights on the boat. But so I mean, I'm laughing, but it was an interesting
I think
experience just to realize, like, wait, we're the ones who came up with that. And then a bunch of other, like 100 other people went to make it real, and the guy caught on fire, you know.
Yeah, I think what Ethan's saying is our colorful description may have maimed a Thai stuntman for life, unfortunately.
I'm sure they paid him extra.
It is one of the strange things about being a writer, film and TV, when because it's not our medium. It's in film, it's the director's medium, but in TV, it's the writer producer's medium. But still, to watch other people take what we typed and turn it into stuff. I know the first time that it happened, it was quite breathtaking to me.
Well,
Absolutely.
For me, I remember the very first, for me, they really had more impact when we were actually officially on a set.
Oh, sure.
Demon Night, we were only on the set for a few hours. At one point, we met Bill Sadler.
Oh yeah, you guys know all about that.
Yeah, but we're
going to talk about this.
But the first actual, we wrote a pilot for a series called Brimstone, which was actually sort of Demon Night-esque. Pilot got greenlit, and we went to Toronto to shoot it. And the first night on the set was an exterior, and they had, and it had been snowing, and there were these trucks.
It was a rooftop. There was
hundreds of people, and I just remember looked at Ethan and I said, "Oh my God, look what we've wrought! Look at this! Oh my God!" Because it was just like you're like, "Holy crap!" There's like hundreds of people doing this thing because we had this crazy idea 8 months ago, and now it's
someone spending money on shit you typed.
Yeah, I mean, also that was the first time, like with Men of War, there was a pre-existing screenplay that we were hired to do significant rewriting of, and we did a good job, and it went forward. It got made. Demon Night, or I'm sorry, Brimstone, because like Cy said, when Demon Night got made, we were only tangentially connected to the actual production at most or at best. When Brimstone, the pilot, got greenlit and we went to Toronto to shoot it, that was a very momentous occasion, I think, for both of us. And Cy just talked about, like, when he said to me, "What have we wrought?" Because none of that had existed until the two of us had just come up with the idea, started to write it, or started to pitch it. Somebody bought the pitch, then we wrote the script, then it got greenlit to go into production. And just to be there and see all of that activity and equipment and humanity, it was kind of amazing. I mean, it was all good. And maybe there was a little bit of weight of responsibility, but for the most part, I just remember being like, holy fuck, this is fantastic, finally.
It's part of the difference between film and TV as a writer. And TV, we own so much more of it. It's not taken away from us. We especially if you get to produce what you've written, you are writing it from soup to nuts, from start to finish, from the inception until the final sound edit. That's it, man. I mean, really,
no, that's very true. And I actually remember, it was a long time ago, but I do remember vividly when we got finished with the pilot for Brimstone, for that show. It was the first time in my life that I would have that conversation with friends or people. I would say, like, "Oh, hey, if you want to, if you're interested and you want to watch this, if you like it, it's because of what me and my partner did. If you don't like it, it's because of what me and my partner did."
Right.
Because it's exactly what we set out to do. And that was the first time. And we had been working and eking out a living, or not even we were already somewhat successful feature screenwriters at that point. Actually, we had been working in the trenches of the business for more than a decade, because it was 1998 when we did that project. Or at least for a decade, I guess. For 1 decade, we've been working in the trenches. And that was the first time I felt like I could say to somebody, watch this. It's exactly what we set out to do.
Being as Demon Knight was a feature, you were, and being that you guys were the writers, you were in the worst possible position, alas. You said that was the first thing you guys wrote together.
Yes, we should tell you the origin of Demon Knight.
I think we're there.
Well, okay, so the thing is, as you guys both know, Demon Knight with a K has had quite a life after death, with death being the end of its theatrical run, right? For a variety of reasons. I think the biggest one, obviously, being it's a horror film, and horror fans, you know, the horror community loves what it loves, and if they like a project, it never dies. It just lives on, which is wonderful, right? Mm-hmm. And so a few years ago, we were kind of like taken by surprise by people starting to contact us out of the blue. I guess it was when the 20th anniversary first came up. So it was like 2000, what was that? 2015, maybe? Well, it was 1995. Right? So, yeah, so it was 2015, and like they made a documentary, and they made additional footage, features with interviews for like the Blu-ray or whatever. And, you know, it sort of caught us unawares, but it was really cool. And then it just seems to have like continued, you know, like then it was like the 25th anniversary or whatever. I don't know. It just keeps going and going and going, which is really cool.
Well, actually, I thought you were going to tell a story about.
Well, I mean,
about the Katori Hall story. We were on I were doing a show that we hadn't created, but a show we were running, and we were working with this younger African-American woman playwright named Katori Hall, who I believe is won a Pulitzer Prize at this point. And she has
she created and runs this show called Pussy Valley.
Valley on Stars. At the time, she was an East Coast playwright who we had hired on this show.
But this is in LA, and what had happened was, I think it was around Halloween, and like maybe the Egyptian Theater was having like a horror film festival or something in Hollywood, and one of the movies that they showed was Demon Knight, and I had like taken my wife and my, at the time, probably like three teenage kids, you know, to go see it. And so it came up, whatever. Actually, neither Sign nor I brought it up. It was just this writer, Katori Hall, had seen like the ad, or maybe, you know, we still had like a newspaper in the writer's room at the time. And she like was talking about, oh, look, this is one of my favorite movies, and it's showing at the Egyptian or whatever. And Sai and I looked at each other. We were like, one of your favorite movies? And then she was like, yeah. And she went off about how she loved Demon Knight, blah, blah, blah. And we looked at her. We were like, you know, we wrote that movie. And her jaw almost dropped. And she was like, what? And my first thought was like, because I'm like Sai is the nice guy, and I'm the son of a bitch guy. And my first thought was like, you had to prepare for a telephone interview with us. Then we hired you. You got the job. You came to LA to work for us. You've been working for us on this show for like months, and you never checked our freaking credits. Like, that's crazy, you know. But I mean, she's amazing. She's incredibly talented, incredibly smart. She's awesome. Whatever. It wasn't on her to-do list, you know. And we were like, yeah, we wrote that movie, you know.
But we should go back to the origin story, Ethan. You were going off to
well.
It's okay.
So this is the narrative truth versus the real truth. So I'm going to say something that Ethan will correct me as we go on.
I mean, the whole origin story starts with me, so I could just tell the story. But if you want to tell your version first,
it's funny. It's funny because
because in your version it starts with you.
No. It does start with Ethan, but it starts in two different versions of it, because my side of this was a phone call where Ethan called me, because we had met at NYU, we had traded scripts, but we hadn't actually worked together in any way, shape, or form. But
that's the part that Alan mentioned, but we didn't like detail, which I'll give the very brief summary of, which is we met at this graduation party We were the only two people even though most of the people at the party were NYU film students, but we were the only two people there who wanted to like write or direct traditional Hollywood feature films. Because at the time, NYU was very much a documentary, cinema verite, experimental film school. And,
Sure.
USC and UCLA were like the industry feeder schools, but mainstream Hollywood storytelling was not really a popular thing at NYU, which is okay. That's fine. But that was what Cy and I were both into. And so we sort of hit it off and started talking about stuff. And it turned out we were in the middle of writing like our first feature screenplays. And we exchanged contact info and we traded scripts when we finished them. And we were both impressed by each other's scripts. So we kept in contact. And then this friend of mine, who was the closest thing I ever had to like a mentor in the film business or television industry, because like same as Cy, our origins have nothing to do. Nobody we in our family or friends had anything to do with movies or television when we were kids growing up. So this guy came from like a similar background to mine in Brooklyn. And I had met him when I was still in college, and he was actually like working as a low budget screenwriter and breaking through to be like a legit studio screenwriter.
Tell him who it is. His name was Mark.
Mark Patrick Carducci.
His most famous. He has passed away, but his most famous. He co-wrote Pumpkinhead, the Stan Winston movie, and created that project.
Yeah, and he was a great guy, and he had gotten a call from a low budget producer in New York City asking him to write a movie for him. And he had basically said, look, I can't do that anymore because, you're going to pay me like $5,000 and I've moved beyond that. But I know someone who you should talk to because he's very talented, hardworking guy, good work ethic, whatever, and a good writer. And he has like no credits and he'll work really cheap like you need. And that was me. So I got this like opportunity, and I had one project. The thing was, they were like very specific marching orders. Like it was supposed to be a low budget movie, all shot in one location, right? And I had a project that was kind of similar to that, but not exactly that. And I wanted to find something that was exactly on the bullseye of that target, because it's, you're an aspiring screenwriter and somebody tees up an opportunity for something to actually get made. You want it to hit as close to the target as possible, or to the bullseye of the target as possible. So I called up Cy and I said, hey, this opportunity fell in my lap. If we can come up with something that's low budget and it all takes place in one location, this guy may very well like just make it like in the net. He's got to start shooting something like in a few months or in the city. And what happened was we literally stayed on the phone for like 40 minutes, just brainstorming and coming up with basically Demon Night, or what would become Demon Night. And
it was the one location. That was the spur to.
We were very influenced at the time with Night of the Living Dead, Assault on Precinct 13, Carpenter's movie, The Evil Dead had just come out, and also Ethan had a friend. We had a friend named Mark Bishop who was an aspiring writer, but also an aspiring physical producer like you, Gil. And so he with our concept was originally like, well, maybe this is something we could make or something we could put together on our own if nothing worked out. So at some point, my version of Ethan's story is that.
Well, the only thing I'll go ahead and finish is we worked it out on the phone in that like 40-minute phone call to where it was like a legitimate, log line / paragraph to a page synopsis.
You both saw it.
Yeah. Like the vision, the creative vision of it. Yes, we saw it. And I don't remember if I just like typed it up on my like typewriter or something, but I I took it and I took it to the producer who I went and met in Manhattan, and he hated it. His thing was like,
well, Ethan, slow down a second.
Yeah, okay.
The thing was, my version of Ethan's story. Now I'm going to play Ethan in this. We're going to switch roles because I'm going to do my version.
Thank goodness.
Ethan called me up and said, this producer who hooked us up, his Mark Carducci hooks up this producer. He needs something by like Monday or Tuesday next week. And I don't have anything lying around. Do you have anything lying around? He needs a low budget, preferably horror genre movie and location. And I said, Ethan, I don't have anything that meets the parameters, but he doesn't know that. We should just come up with something before Tuesday. And I think at that point we might have gotten Mark involved, or maybe Mark was involved later at that point.
No, but you do remember when? Well, I guess it was when you said.
And then we got together and we wrote.
Come up with it. It was that same phone call that became the break the story brainstorm.
Yes, but we actually wrote before you turned it in. We actually wrote an actual detailed outline.
Right.
The movie of Demon Knight.
That's right. And what happened was we went the third member of the triumvirate, Mark Bishop. He worked at a place which still exists in Manhattan called Jerry Ollinger's Movie Material Store, which was one of a handful of, at the time, brick and mortar storefronts in New York City and Los Angeles who were real businesses that sold movie posters and movie still photos. And a lot of their business was messengering the movie still photos to every news and talk show in my case, or in Jerry Ollinger's case in New York City, or in the case of like the Hollywood book and poster shop in LA, in Hollywood, to the LA based news, TV shows, and morning discussion talk shows, and all the like interstitial imagery that you would see in the era before digital imagery. Every show had a buy, when Madonna came to do an interview or whatever, they would have to buy still photos, black and white and color still photos of Madonna to use to bracket Madonna coming on. So that was a lot of their business. And a lot of their business was also just customers from all over the world. A lot of tourists from Japan would just come and show up and spend a lot of money buying movie posters and still photos. So this friend of ours, Mark Bishop, worked at this place in Manhattan, and we would go there. I guess this was the first time it ever happened. Cy and I went there to basically work with him. He stayed because he was basically like the manager of the place already. And when they locked up for the night, we just like hung out there. And as Cy said, we basically broke the entire movie. I remember we ended up writing like a 40-page freaking treatment, which is insane considering probably the finished screenplay when we wrote it was like 90 pages. Mm-hmm. It was like the entire damn movie, and all taking place in one location with the basic plot of what Demon Knight, the movie Demon Knight.
And then Ethan turned it into this producer, and then we got the call, I hate this, it's terrible.
I got the call. Yeah.
What's the great line, Ethan told me? I like movies that move.
Yeah, I like movies that move. And it was a little odd considering the specific parameters were one location. But I guess, he wanted like a compound where people moved from building to building and there was like a yard outside also or whatever.
So at that point, we were like, well, we spent all this time.
He wasn't talking about rope.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Exactly. Well, I mean, the other thing to say is I had another project just of my own, which, like I said, sort of fit the bill, but not exactly. Like it wasn't a supernatural horror story at all. And it was a little more afield. But when he said he hated Demon Knight, I gave him that. And then he actually liked that enough to want to make it. And they actually made it. But that's like a separate story, whatever. But what happened was
he even likes to describe it was the first all indoor post-apocalyptic spaghetti western. So,
Yeah, it changed a lot from the screenplay to the, as you guys are very familiar with happening.
But we did so we got together and we were like, you know what, this is great. We had a good time working together, and we have this movie now. And as we said, our friend Mark Bishop was aspiring
producer. And that's when we
we're like, let's
decided,
write this movie and maybe we can actually make it ourselves as a low budget movie.
right. And the idea was Cy and I, who both at the time were aspiring wannabe directors, Cy and I would co-direct it, and our friend Mark Bishop would produce it, because he was a pretty talented and like competent line producer and just producer, whatever.
And now, you guys could make that movie. I mean, really and truly, you absolutely could. You know.
Well, okay. So the story continues that we wrote the script, and then
the one thing I will interject is, Cy came over to where I lived, and we sat down together to start trying. We had never written like a page of a screenplay before together. We had done this brainstorming treatment, but that was more like notes, and then I had just like typed it up or whatever. So we sat down together, and I sat at the keyboard, and Cy stood next to me, and it was a Commodore 64, which a file was limited to 4 pages of screenplay text maximum. So we sat down and we started to write the opening scene of Demon Knight. And I haven't talked about this in a long time or thought about it in a long time, but it was a pretty profoundly important night of our both of our lives, because it was the first time we'd ever tried to do this, and it was like fade in, and we wrote that opening scene, which is still the opening scene in the movie with the car chase, and it was all action description, and it was like, whoa, where did that come from? That's pretty cool. Like we just worked together very, 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 very well, you know. And then we just kept working, you know, like sometimes weeknights after work and sometimes on weekends, trying to, you know, grinding through, adapting the treatment that we had turned in that the guy hated to be a finished screenplay. And at some point, you know, we finished.
Now, in terms of the history before it gets to you guys, because it's another sort of convoluted, crazy story. What I remember is Mark was babysitting for a lawyer in New York, a successful lawyer at some point, and Mark was reading the script for Demon Knight that we had recently finished, worked with him on, and Mark was making notes or whatever. And this lawyer was getting ready to go out with his wife, and he looks at Mark and says, "What are you reading?" And Mark says, "Oh, I'm this screenplay my buddies and I wrote." He said, "Oh, is it any good?" And Mark said, "I think it's pretty good." And he said, "You know, my brother is an aspiring producer in Hollywood. He's looking for projects. Can I send that script to him?" And so he sent Demon Knight to this producer who was working in Hollywood. I think he had written Eddie and the Cruisers 2 or something, and he was an aspiring producer. And
Charles Zev Cohn.
And he called us out of the blue a week or so later and said, "Hey, I really like this. I want to develop it with you guys." I don't know if he paid us anything, Ether.
No, it was all free options. It was all free options.
But we worked with him doing some rewrites and doing some stuff. And literally, I would say a few months after that, we got this call that he had gotten it to Tom Holland. And Tom Holland, coming off of Child's Play and, you know, Fright Night, that Tom Holland really liked the script. And Tom Holland at that point had a deal with, I think, Alive Entertainment. They were doing it was where, you know, Carpenter made Prince of Darkness and Children of the Damned. Carpenter had made a couple movies for them, and Tom Holland was on tap to do some movies. They were doing all these horror movies, and Holland really liked it. And at that point, we were like, "Hey, we're the quickest overnight success in Hollywood. We wrote this movie, and 6 months later, Tom Holland is directing our movie." Well, that's about 6, 7, 8 years before Demon Knight finally got made by you guys. But at the time,
Well,
big
also,
deal.
we didn't get a red cent, let alone a dime or a dollar in connection in connection with that. You know, it was just exciting and
Sure.
somewhat motivational
Yeah.
to keep struggling, you know, on the aspiring screenwriter.
I remember the Tom Holland version was Tom Holland. It said it's pretty obvious now. He wanted to cast Chris Sarandon in the Billy Zane role as the collector because Chris Sarandon was like his guy. And then that fell apart after a while because I think Tom Holland went off to do Fatal Beauty, or so he got like a big studio action movie. So it's like, oh, I'm not doing horror movies anymore. And then the script wound its way then to Mary Lambert, who had just done Pet Sematary. So we were still working on this sort of B+, A- list of horror directors. And I remember Mary Lambert's big thing is that she loved, there's this place in Northern California called the Madonna Inn, where there's all
Oh, sure. Yeah.
there's theme rooms. There's like the caveman room and the zebra room. So I remember that was Mary Lambert's big thing, is that all the rooms in the hotel, she wanted them all to be theme rooms. So when Geraldine has this room and Cordelia, they all had like theme rooms. That was her big hook on it. So those two things almost happened. In the meantime, Ethan and I were doing our thing and trying to break in. And
well, the next link in the chain that connects Demon Knight and us to you guys and the Tales from the Crypt is Silver Productions, is Joel Silver and his, I was going to say mini empire, but at the time his empire on the lot at Warner Brothers,
Sure.
across the lane from Dick Donner's empire on the lot at Warner Brothers. And what happened was the guy who we mentioned earlier, who was the closest thing to a mentor, like a industry mentor that we had, Mark Carducci. He moved out here before Cy moved out here, and was gaining success. And he had a bunch of friends, and he would give everybody he was a big fan of our writing, and he would give everybody, once the Demon Knight script existed, he spread it around, and that's why we got representation. Our first manager, who like reached out to us from LA because he had read the script and a couple of other spec features that we had written after that, and was interested in representing us.
Aside from the guy who hated the treatment, it always had fans.
It's very true.
That's actually true.
That's very, very true. Anyhow, one of the people he gave it to was a younger friend of his who was our age, who worked as an entry level at Silver Pictures and started to work his way sort of like up the chain of command there.
What was his name?
You'll remember him, Brian Whitten.
Sure, of course.
Brian Whitten, who went on. He was a big development guy at New Line for years.
Yeah.
And then he went to
was it Paramount?
Then he went to Paramount, and now he's working with K&B, Greg Nicotero. He's his development executive.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
So he was a huge fan of us and our writing, and we became friends, because when we came out here, even before Cy moved here, we meet up with Mark and we meet up with his circle of industry people, and that included Brian Whitten. And Brian had tried to push Demon Knight at Silver Pictures as, hey, this is a great property and a great project and we should do it. And of course, even if you love Demon Knight, it's still a supernatural horror film. And that wasn't really the brand of Silver Pictures, which was much more grounded action. Now, maybe you could argue about how grounded it's, like crazy, over the top, but it still was not horror.
But we ended up optioning one of our other spec scripts to Joel's company.
Yes.
It was more of an action movie.
Yes, which was an action, kind of a buddy action comedy. Which
So
again,
we were
that's
actually working with Joel Silvers, with Brian and
Craig Perry.
Craig Perry, who was there at that point.
And also the guy who was an aspiring writer, worked in development, passed away tragically, too young.
Scott
Nimmerfro.
Scott did development for Donner's company, and Scott on Tales from the Crypt, we didn't have a staff. It was me and basically Scott, who would, after my first season on the show, which was the third season was Gil and our first season. It took me about half the season to realize that Scott knew the show better than I did, and I should just leave him the fuck alone.
Oh wow, Scott! Our experience with Scott was he was really smart and efficient and just competent when it came to storytelling. You know.
Yeah.
So we had done this. We had worked with done development with these people, and we were getting paid at this.
But we hadn't done anything with Scott until hadn't done anything with Scott until a few steps down the path, because what happened was Brian had hit a wall with Demon Knight at Silver Pictures, and that's okay because in the interim, like Cy just mentioned, Brian had taken another spec script of ours, which at the time was called Blown Away, actually, and gotten Silver Pictures to like option it. And then there was an issue.
We were getting
the IRA bomber movie called Blown Away like came out. And I actually remember Joe Silver later on when Demon Knight went into production or pre-production. Joe Silver actually said something to us about like, oh, it was really good. Those bitches had to come crawling to me for that title, you know? And some kind of deal where he got something.
It was a title swap because at that point, and you guys might have read Demon at that point, it was called Judgment Night because somebody said, well, demons don't sell. We can't put demon in the title. So it was called Judgment Night. Then there was the Emilio Estevez movie that was coming out called Judgment Night.
Judgment Night.
And Joel owned the Judgment Night title, so he had to like swap it, and then he had to Blown Away. Like we helped Joe make money with these titles of our movies.
But
that was like
not to jump around too much, but it all worked out well from our perspective, because especially me personally, and I think Cy also and Mark Bishop, our third co-writer, all loved the title Demon Knight with a K, and one of the only times we had an actual in-person conversation with Joel through the entire Demon Knight pre-production, production, post-production process was we were there and he was like, oh, come into my office. And I guess Brian Witten had brought us there or whatever. And we went in with Brian sort of like trailing in our wake. And he said, listen, guys,
what do you call this thing?
I have a problem because
we can't call it Judgment Night anymore.
We can't.
I just sold that title to Fox for like a lot of
whatever. I made this deal with the titles. We can't call it that. What are we going to call this movie? And I remember I didn't hesitate. I said, you know, Joel, we've always loved our original title, Demon Knight with a K, like the hero's job in the story. And he just said like, Demon Knight. Yeah. Okay. Maybe, man. Yeah. And that was it. That was like the entire.
We're so happy because we got our original title back after all that.
Yeah. But going back to
that is such a Joel story. There's so much work and chaos, and at the end of the day, it's just what it always was going to be. Oh, for fuck's sake.
That's true. Before the people who worked for him on a full-time basis decided it had to be changed. Yeah. But so we had hit the wall with Demon Knight at Silver Pictures, but then Blown Away had been optioned and was kind of alive there until it died for other funny reasons. And then the Tales from the Crypt package deal became a thing. And we knew nothing about that because we knew nothing about Tales from the Crypt, the ongoing HBO show, which was your guys' empire or kingdom.
I mean, we knew it because we watched it, but we didn't know anything about it.
We knew of it. We knew it existed.
No, you guys at this point is sort of where the Katz and Adler part would come in, because all we know is sort of third hand, which was that
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that. You can say
no. But wait.
secondhand. It's not
Well,
really
secondhand.
third hand.
Well, however, whichever hand you want to use, the thing is that what we heard was that
Well, we were friends with people in the.
no. But my point is that you guys had the 2 scripts that you guys had developed, and then there was a third slot, and it was supposed to be
From Dusk Till Dawn,
the Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
And then Tarantino blew up, and they couldn't close the deal.
Right.
And somehow, because the script had been lying on the desk of Brian Whitten for like months and months and months.
Well, probably a couple of years by that.
Somehow Demon Knight got thrown in as like the third movie in the rotation. And we were very excited to hear this because Brian would say, hey, I think we're going to submit Demon Knight along.
Yeah, and that we were told it was going to be the third in a package of 3 features that Tales from the Crypt Productions were sending over to Universal because you guys had made a deal with Universal. They were going to be the feature film studio that was going to release all these movies. And yeah, we were excited because it seemed like we were maybe after all these near misses over the preceding, because we first finished the first draft of that script in 1988. And this was like 1994. So, it was 6 or 7. We had mostly written it in 87. In fact, the very first date on the first draft might have been like December of 87. So it was like 7 years, So it was very exciting. And then it became much more exciting because the word came back, oh, Universal wants to make your script first.
That's the first movie.
And then, so this is where we cross over into another section of this discussion because I'm just going to be very above board and forthright. I'm going to say
go for it.
For the past, we gave both Cy and I individually and a couple of times together did some interviews with like fan magazines and horror genre magazines or publications or shows of one kind or another soon after Demon Knight, became a movie. And then there was like a long sort of like radio silence period. And then like back years ago, back in 2015 or whatever, like it started to bubble up and we were constantly being asked about it because it still had this following in the world. And there are certain things that we basically just don't talk about because even though like for me, even though I'm the more SOB confrontational, if something has to be said, just fucking say it. That's the way it is. Like in general, when it has to do with our careers, like if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Because what point is it really going to serve,
Indeed.
So the one point that maybe it serves is just at this point, because like so much time has passed, is just the sort of like completism's record, like the absolute unfiltered, all-encompassing truth of the origins of Demon Knight. And maybe
the whole story.
Maybe there is some inherent value to that makes it worthwhile to talk about, in public.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
There absolutely is.
Okay.
Well, sure, you say that. This is your show.
Yeah, exactly. You guys have
bias. I admit my bias.
But I agree, or I wouldn't have started with
when we
this
see the finished version of the show, all the stuff that Ethan and I say that's not is going to get cut out, and it's just going to be
not at all. No, not at all.
Oh, that's what they're waiting for.
Well, here's the thing, Ethan. I just want to do again. Let me just do the short narrative truth. We started doing development with Scott Nimmerfro and a little bit with Ernest Dickerson.
Well, first with Scott, and then
Scott,
Ernest came
and
on.
then Ernest, and then at some point you guys fired us off the movie. So that if the listeners have been waiting for the big punchline,
I don't think we ever shied away. I don't think that's news. Like I think we've mentioned that timeline in the past. It's not.
And I will say this also. I will say 2 things. One is that Well, you know what? Let me say I would say we got to go to the set once, to the airplane hangar where you guys were shooting. Really thanks to the Universal executive who actually really liked our original script. And she said, "Okay, I know you guys got canned off the movie, but fuck those guys. I'm gonna get Ethan to the set." And we met Bill Sadler, who basically had a great backhand compliment. He basically said, "Man, you guys read too many comic books." And I was like, "Oh, thanks a lot, Bill." You know,
it was not intended as
it was an insult, not a
but
bad.
now, after comic book adaptations have earned in the intervening decades
Billions of
that
dollars.
comment like $1 trillion around the world, it could be spun as a compliment, but it was definitely not. I was there. I saw the look on his face.
No, we were there.
It was
Yeah,
no
right.
compliment.
I was trying to be kind to Bill Sadler, but
I love Bill Sadler. He's a great actor. He gives a great performance in our movie, but that's, you know.
the other thing I remember was I remember Ernest basically calling us once in a while during.
That's a very specific anecdote that really you should leave to me, Si. If you're.
Why? Because you have.
Because it didn't happen from time to time. It was. I will give both the.
Maybe it was once. Maybe it was once.
And absolute factual record of this particular.
Okay. I'll back off. Ethan, go ahead.
We had. It was our impression that what really got us officially fired by you guys was that we refused to move off the one place where we wouldn't like agree to rewrite something and really change how it worked, which was the ending. And the one thing was, in all the many drafts through all the iterations with different directors, we had rewritten Demonite. By that time of actually being in real pre-production, we had rewritten Demonite significantly, probably a minimum half a dozen times. Like, I mean, not page one rewrites, but significant major rewrites for different directors at different drafts, different producers, whatever. So we were not prima donnas or, I don't believe we were overly precious with the project. But the one thing that had never changed through all those various versions was the ending. And you guys really wanted us to change the ending.
Let me jump in, but I'll say this was the disconnect. And this was the disconnect. And I understand a little bit at the time, and now I understand a little bit more, that the disconnect was Demon Knight wasn't really a Tales from the Crypt story. It was a supernatural story, but it was a heroic journey story. It
was much less ironic and much more sincere.
Right. Yeah. Now it did have tonally the humor, In fact, I think it's funny because what you guys did when you did your production rewrite, it was weird because you were taking the same jokes that we put in the movie and you were just sort of slightly altering the jokes. I said, it's like a comedian watching somebody else do his act. Where it's like Alan Gill basically felt this version of it's the same joke about pussy on the table, but it's slightly changed in somewhere. But the thing is that it was really, you guys were trying to hammer this thing that was not a Tales from the Crypt story. It wasn't like somebody does something evil and they get paid back. You guys were trying to hammer it into a Tales of the Crypt episode. And we kept pushing back like, that it's not a Tales of the Crypt story. It's a hero story. And I will say, Ethan and I had ultimately a Pyrrhic victory because the original ending that you guys shot, and which I remember going to the test screening in Pasadena or whatever, landed like a lead balloon. And at that point, you guys had to go back and redo the ending and come up with something that, quite frankly, is more in line with what Ethan and I were originally trying to do, where Geraldine is heroic and she fights Billy Zane at the end and whatever. And I felt like, I remember sitting there going, and I thought, and the movie played great. And I remember at the end, you could just feel the air go out of the whole thing. And I kept thinking, and I said to Ethan, I was looking like, We kept telling those guys. We've been telling these guys for a year. It's not that you got the ending works. The original ending. It's her heroic. You want to see her go up against Billy Zane at the end of the movie.
What did we I'm so forgotten. What
was
did we
basically-
what did we change it to?
Basically, the original ending was there's the transference of the mantle of heroism from Breaker to Geraldine.
Right.
And then Geraldine kicks Demon ass. And we had Geraldine kicking Demon ass in a sort of like I mean, there were different versions of it, I guess, but it was basically like a montage sequence of her just kicking Demon ass, which
and finally ending with her
led
going
to
up against
her in a mano
With Billy Zane.
showdown with Billy Zane, who had it, like almost got the better of her, but in the end she beat him too, and she did it by spitting the blood that was he had that line, "Oh, you must be in exquisite pain, my dear. You're covered in blood," and she said, "It's not my blood," and like spat the blood at him, and of course it was Breaker's blood mixed in with a little bit of the blood from before, which dated back to the blood of Jesus Christ, and she beat his ass, right? And what you guys had been telling us was we've seen that. We've seen the demons. We've seen her fight. We've seen all these characters fight with demons. It's not worth it. It's not worth the time, the money. We have to do something different. And
I remember there was something with an early CG giant head, like Billy Zane became a giant flaming Wizard of Oz head. It was like some effects-laden ending that was not cathartic or satisfying at all. And again, I would say this was the disconnect, which I understand more now in terms of what you guys were trying to do with the script and make it Tales from the Crypt. And we were, but it's not Tales from the Crypt. I mean, it's ironic that it's.
I don't think we never said it's not Tales from the Crypt, because we're not that stupid to be in the Tales from the Crypt office and say to the two guys who ran the Tales from the Crypt empire. What we said, the line I remember from myself saying was, it's not, even though it's a story about monsters, it's not a monster movie, it's a hero movie. Yes. The most important thing is the hero, and you have to let the audience enjoy seeing the hero who has suffered for the past, 80 minutes, kick ass for the last 5 to 10 minutes.
And triumph over the bad guy.
Yeah. And anyway, so we had, that was a long diversion from the Ernest Dickerson phone call anecdote. So what happened was we got fired by you guys, and Ernest was still there. And the thing is, the first day we met Ernest was in the lobby. I was sitting in the lobby so I wasn't there yet, but he showed up like 5 minutes later. I was sitting in the lobby of Joel Silver's office, and Ernest walked in, and we started talking. Just, hello, and then small talk of two people who are movie people. And it turned out we had like virtually, I won't say virtually identical, but heavily overlapping loves and influences from the world of movies, right? And also from the world of comic books, because I remember we were talking and somehow Lone Wolf and Cub, the Japanese comic book, came up. And this is really crazy, insane, and shows how insane I am. I started unbuttoning my shirt, and I unbuttoned my shirt and flashed my T-shirt to him. And because I had my Lone Wolf and Cub fucking comic book T-shirt on from like when it was republished for a short time by an American company called like First Comics, which it died before they got through the entire series. And then it was years later, it was republished in English in smaller size, like the original Japanese manga version by Dark Horse, the entire run of Lone Wolf and Cub. And I remember flashing and being like, that's like I live for that. And that T-shirt was already like 10 years old that when I showed it to him. And we were just like, and then Sai showed up and started talking about like old Kung Fu movies. and other cinematic influences. And we were literally on the exact same page with him from the get-go. And I believe he probably, you know, had some pushback with you guys about some of the, we've got to make it more of a Tales from the Crypt story, you know, development process, whatever. And what happened was we got fired. And we were like at Cy's house, because I still lived in Brooklyn at this time. And we were at Cy's house, and we got a phone call, which somehow I was the one. I don't remember if he called Cy's house and Cy gave me the phone, or I just picked up the phone. But I remember being on the phone with him, and this is literally what he said. And I've never said this on the public record before, but he basically said, look, I was just in a meeting with Alan and Gil, and they were going on about, you know, they were making all these arguments about how we had to change the ending. And I know you guys have like all the really strong, great counter arguments, like to knock that down. And can you just like tell me again, like what they are? And if Cy had answered the phone, maybe, I don't know what would have happened. I can't say. But I basically said, are you fucking kidding me? You let us get fucking fired off our movie, and now you're calling us in secret, asking how to fucking protect the movie from the people that you're working with still? No, sorry. I think you have to deal with that yourself. Now, looking back on it, decades down the line, maybe that was a really bad move, because if I had calmly listed for him point A, point B, point C, he would have been able to go back in and do heroic battle defending the ending. But personally, I think you guys still would have, you know, had what, I mean, you were the decision makers. You were the ones calling the shots. So,
but see,
let me answer that a little bit if I can.
Go ahead, Gil.
So when you say we were calling the shots, for the most part we were, and I'm not trying to dodge a bullet here, but we had a lot of pressure from two sources or three sources. If you Dick Donner, Joel Silver, and the estate. And they were very, very concerned about protecting the franchise. The idea was to make 3 pictures and then make maybe 3 more pictures. And this being the first one, they really were very much more involved with what we thought we wanted to do with that first picture,
right,
than we would have liked.
That's interesting to hear. And I mean, especially when you mentioned the estate, and I guess the 2 superstar producers wanting it, I imagine, to stick more to the classic Tales from the Crypt tone and, style.
Yeah. They, as we know now, didn't have a very good relationship with Bill Gaines, because they kind of screwed him in his deal, which we found out about only years later. But we were very concerned when we did the show. We had development people from 4 different producers, from Bob Zemeckis to Dick Donner to Walter Hill to Joel Silver, all these development people giving us notes about scripts, right? Okay, so we had to deal with that. But Alan and I only had one concern, and that was Bill Gaines. Because we felt like, here we are taking his dad's and his work from 1955 and making it into a TV show. And I said, and we both looked at each other and said, if they look at the show and they hate it, we have failed. And we don't want to go there.
Bill Gaines was God. Bill Gaines was God.
So we sent Bill Gaines. We sent Bill Gaines scripts before we sent them to HBO, before we sent them to the producers or their development minions who thought they were geniuses. We always went to Bill and said, and I would say to him, Bill, look, it's really simple. I want you to comment on the script. If you don't like what we have, I'm not going to argue with you. We're going to change it. It's going to be that simple. So don't think you have to be defensive or we're going to be argumentative. It's going to be that simple. And we really just want, at the end of the day, you to love the show and love the material and love how we're doing it. And if anything along the way changes in that, you need to call me right away and get me on the phone and get my ass, tell me what you think. And that was our whole modus from the very first day we got into this thing. So now we're dealing with this movie, less Bill, because I think he trusted Alan and myself, but more so Dick and Joel, not Bob at all. They were concerned about, making sure that they didn't offend Bill more than they've already offended him.
Huh.
And mainly their offense was his deal. And that's why years later, you probably know the story that, the estate came to me and said, would you do a new show? We want to give you the rights. And of course, as they got further into that, they realized they had the rights to the comic books, but they didn't have the rights to the Crypt Keeper as he was portrayed in the TV show any longer. So you couldn't just take it over and run with it.
Yeah.
And that's why today, you'll never see Tales from the Crypt being made again, because the estate and the daughter, they hate Joel, they hated Dick, and they wanted us to do it, and that could never happen.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a 25-year-old incoming apology to you guys, because we're writers, you're writers. We don't like to treat writers badly because we've been there and we've been treated badly along the way as well. So I think along the way we didn't think we were thinking more that we're protecting what we needed to protect to have Joel and Dick be able to talk to Bill.
Yeah.
We weren't looking at the other, down the road the other way in terms of what you were thinking or how you were being treated. And so if that, now I see a little bit more of it. And I realize, we should have had a different kind of a conversation with the two of you, just the four of us.
Yes.
The one thing I appreciate that, I think we already got that apology many years ago from your partner, but that's because we crossed paths with him and he was very gracious about it, I have to say. And that's very gracious of you. But I will tell you the way I always, because one thing, like, again, with me and Cy, like, I don't know that I'm more of a villainous human being, but I usually write the villain monologues when we work. And we always, because we together, both of us believe in trying to make villains as like the three-dimensional human characters as possible. Because guess what? Just because you think they're a villain doesn't mean they think they're a villain or they see what they're doing as villainy. Most people who do things that matter believe in what they're doing, at least at the time, no matter what how anybody else sees it, right? So I would always, because over the many, many decades or years and decades, I would always frame discussing this topic, the subject, the same way. I would always say, look, you two guys, and this is a little different from what you just shared. And obviously it's from outside point of view. So who knows if it's at all accurate, but this is how I saw it as an outsider looking in to the Tales from the Crypt feature film topic from a close place, but not inside, the center of it. You two guys had busted your asses for those 4 superstar producers for fucking years, doing an incredible job with, not that much budget and having all kinds of challenges hurled your way and always rising to the occasion. And what we had been sort of like told was one of, in addition to being paid, one of the reasons for doing that was it had sort of been dangled in front of you. You guys, you keep the trains running on time and deliver the goods for us. And when we make the movie, you guys are going to make the movie and it's going to be your movie. And then you were going to make 3 movies. And then one movie like slipped out and you guys couldn't give a fuck for understandable reasons about it. Project flew in from outside, from a completely other realm. Flew in, okay, it's the 3rd one, who gives a fuck? They deliver the scripts to Universal, and then you hear back, guess what? Yeah, you guys get to make the movie, but it's not going to be one of your scripts or a script you chose. it's going to be this thing called Demonite with a K by these three guys who you've never fucking heard of. And
3 punks.
I mean, look,
Yes. Now,
but
you're-
just let me just finish.
you are absolutely right, Ethan, and I will absolutely finish it, and I will finish it from the other side because yeah, you're right. Yes, there was territorialism going on, and I will own it completely.
But up to that, I don't think there's anything untoward or indefensible about that attitude. That's the attitude to some extent that I'm sure I would have had. But this is the thing. That's like for the Katz and Adler glass is half full part of this anecdote, right? And then I would say, but for whatever reason, once that happened, those guys, you know, they didn't decide to take out their frustration and rage at this unfair situation they've been put in on Joel Silver, Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill,
Dick Donner.
or Dick Donner. They took it out on us. And it was like,
hello, man on the totem pole.
wait, what did we do to earn this wrath? Now, look, I know what we did. Again, like Cy said, looking back on it, you know, he can see you guys had to try and make Demonite much more of a Tales from the Crypt story. That's understandable. And, you know, it didn't take me that long to realize, like, well, you know, how exactly are you going to take out that rage and frustration on Dick Donner, Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill, and Joel Silver at the time, you know, 4 of the biggest, most successful filmmaker, producers, directors in the world. So that's just, we were just, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time in a way. I mean, it was still good for us that in a way that the movie got made that way. The only bad thing is there will never be a sequel for the same reasons that, you know, that there will never be another.
Believe me, they've probably called you as many times as they've called me about the sequel.
Yeah,
whether it be Billy Zane or, you know, half a dozen other people.
Yeah.
But let me go back to what you said, because there is a little bit of you should know. We did do battle with Joel. I mean, my relationship with Joel was always one of confrontation. I mean, all the years that we worked together on all the movies and TV shows we did together, it was nothing but terrible confrontation. And when I, you know, and I was supposed to direct the first one, which was the carrot for doing a good job on the series. And I didn't want to, I felt the first one should be much more, we had another script that we liked. I thought it should be much more of a thriller kind of a thing. And I wanted to make it more of a thriller. I didn't want to do a sci-fi, and I didn't want to do, you know, sort of a ghost story. And I said that to him, and they said, and the resolve was, okay, you'll do the second one. I said, okay, I'll do the second one, because I don't want to do something I don't want to do. We want to do this one. You guys feel strongly about this one. Great, let's do it. And so that's really where that came. We didn't overtly look to you guys and say, let's kill them. let's smash them. You know, that was not part of our.
So many other plates that were spinning around
because we've been there ourselves, and we have had you know, our heads smashed into the wall as well along the way. So that was not it. I totally understand what you thought and why, but it's a little bit more complicated than that with these guys, and the whole relationship that I had with Joel, and I say had. Was just very confrontation.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is I feel like, and it's funny, this is like the last piece in the puzzle, Gil, because we've had sort of, you know, we didn't have much of a hatchet with Ernest, but I think we had a little bit of we had a little bit of beef with him for not sticking up for us more. And so, you know, because like Ethan said, that phone call was sort of like, I think what upset Ethan so much about it was like, well, why don't you just tell these guys that you want us to come back onto the movie? So I think we had beef with Ernest for a little bit because of that. But again, you know, Ernest invited, I remember we got to see the rough cut on videotape at the house he was renting in LA, and his mom was there and his kids were there. So Ernest did sort of go out of his way to try to include us as much as he could. You know, over the years since, we sort of buried the hatchet with Ernest. It's funny, we ran into him. We hadn't seen him in years, and we got invited. We were developing a project with Gil Adler, and we got invited to one of her Christmas parties in Pasadena. And because Ernest had directed episodes of The Walking Dead,
Right.
we saw Ernest there, and we sort of reconnected, and that was a little bit like.
Well, Cy schmoozed a lot with Ernest there. I didn't schmooze much with him.
I would say we buried the hatchet with Ernest.
In the years since then, at like Demon Night events, like Ernest talked to me, and I
and then with Al, because we were on a picket line with Al in the strike.
That was when we first bumped into each other.
That's right. That's right. That was me also, actually.
2007. And Al was very gracious and said, "Hey, you guys were young writers. We should have been kinder to you, and we shouldn't have pushed you aside like that." So that was cool. So really, and ironically, we wrote a movie for an unproduced Karate Kid sequel for Will Smith, and Jada Pinkett was in a lot of the development meetings. So we talked a little bit to Jada Pinkett about Demon Knight, et cetera. So we've sort of gone through that process. And the irony is that Gil, this is the on-air apology from Gil Adler at this point is like the last domino in this sort of Demon Knight redemption story. And the thing that's so cool, I will say, and I think why everybody has this sort of feeling a little bit, is because it has turned out to be a movie that has lasted and has grown in reputation. As Ethan said, we had no clue that anybody gave a shit about Demon Knight until this African-American female playwright from New York was like, "It's my favorite horror movie of all time," and again, the sort of, we ironically we co-wrote Kung Fu Panda, which is a massive commercial hit, yet the one movie people always want to talk to us about is Demon Knight. So it's become this sort of, so on some level you sort of feel like, well, there's sort of this warm glow that starts to, as you get older, and you're like, well, okay, at some point you just have to you can't, that's what's sort of cool. You can't control these things, go out into the world and they take on a life of their own. And after a while, the positivity starts to wash away the negativity, getting emails from, Kevin Yeager, like, "Oh, I love this movie, and this is the favorite movie I worked on, and we were going to do this." It's like so cool in a way. And you're just like, okay, you know what? It's all good. It's all good at this point in the day, Yeah.
And it's sort of ancient history for all of us meaning the four of us. But, when I think back on it, had somebody, I guess we were so involved with the production of it, had somebody said to us, these guys would like to come to the set, I don't think we would have said no. I don't think we would have said, "What? That's ridiculous. They're not coming to the set." I think we would have said, "Fine, have them come to the set." I don't think anybody once said to me, whether it be management or you guys directly or a friend of yours or Ernest or anybody ever said to me, "Wouldn't it be nice to invite these guys to the set?" Or "These guys really would like to come to the set."
Now,
And
okay. When you get fired off a movie, you don't, but I mean, that's it. That's maybe, I take you at your word. That's cool. That's nice.
You get fired off a movie for a lot of different reasons, but most of the time it's not about personality or not about how you feel about the person. It's about what has to be done to make the project work.
Right, but if you get fired off the movie because your take on the creative storytelling is rejected, and the version that the powers that be embrace and use in its stead is the one going forward, you wouldn't necessarily, think you would be welcome to show up at the set.
No, I don't.
At the end of the day, you weren't being replaced.
No, it wasn't personal.
Because you were bad writers, because it was a great project.
No. I don't think we took it as that you guys thought we were bad writers.
I just want to say, the only thing I'll say is, we were constantly arguing, had you guys stuck to our original ending, it would have saved you all that time and energy and money on reshoots when you had to come up with the ending that's there now that is somewhat similar to what we had originally written. So,
There were now.
But that's not a function totally of Alan and myself. That's a function of, as I said earlier, the whole relationship between the guys who control the rights, and more importantly for us was the guy who controlled or created those rights.
But there was also the maelstrom of the development people around Joel and Dick. Now, with Scott Nimmerfro, at the end of the day, Scott and I became very good friends. In fact, Scott and I wrote together. We wrote a bunch of episodes of Outer Limits together. We wrote a screenplay together. We sold to Mandalay. And that was after, and I know for a fact that when I first started on Scott on Tales from the Crypt, Scott Nimmerfro hated my fucking guts. He hated me.
I started out hating Scott Nimmerfro from the get-go because he was a development guy for Donner.
Yeah.
And he would come to me with notes, and I would go, Scott, it's too late. I mean, we shot this episode.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I said, you guys pay attention to what the production is going. You can't come to me with
Yeah.
And so that's how it started. And I was like, I'm going to bat this guy away, get away from me. And when we went to England and we took the show to England for a year, we brought Scott with us.
Yeah. So
we said to Scott, you want to be the story editor because we really want you to be, part of the show. And our relationship, the three of us, grew during that 6-month period when we were in England. And I also kept in contact with him afterwards.
But
that's cool.
But I think, all right, where Scott is concerned, all right, I think Scott, up until we became friendly, after I was, there was a point where I got fired too. At the end of the day, I got fired off the whole Tales from the Crypt group. That happened to me, and I told you this story.
Gil, did you just fire everybody on this call at one point?
Something. I wish you would have said. I wish you would have said that to me then. It would have been a lot easier and cheaper. It would have been one phone call.
There you go. The moral of this story is we can all look forward to getting fired.
But the point I was getting to was I think Scott had something to do with it. In fact, I know Scott had something to do with it because Scott was very ambitious, and that was the nature of the environment. It was an absolute viper's nest, and But the thing that I got hired to do, and this is the answer to your question, is it. I was the keeper of the flame. I was the defender to the death of what I thought the concept of what our franchise was.
Right.
And so they had given us an impossible task to take our franchise and merge a movie that has nothing to do with our franchise.
Right.
Yeah. These are mutually exclusive propositions. Yeah. They really and truly are.
Yes.
But part of my job was to make them not be mutually exclusive propositions. Well, that's a fantasy and an impossible assignment and doomed to failure. And all you can do is make enemies because basically I'm telling guys, look, I'm trying to answer this idea over here. You're answering something else over here, and you're right. And in essence, I'm right, but these two things can never be right at the same time because they're mutually exclusive propositions. And so,
obviously,
it was always doomed to failure and always doomed to end badly for you guys. And it was because it was hey, we talked about that idea of Dolph Lundgren doing a John Sayles script.
Yeah.
Guys, apples and Pontiacs, and yet sometimes they produce movies that people love.
Well, it works.
So but Demon Knight's another example.
But the thing is, what both of you guys just discussed for a while, all these elements that existed, I think, exactly like you just said, Alan, in the Viper's nest, which was Tales from the Crypt. But we did not exist in that Viper's nest. We were, which is why with
you were visitors, occasional visitors
but I'm just
to
saying,
the Viper's
with
nest.
Absolute, I don't know, it'll sound ridiculous, but Gil, but I'll say with absolute love and in total sincere embrace of all the gracious things that you have said to us about what happened, which I absolutely accept, embrace, believe in, and thank you for. The idea of us being welcome on the set, I mean, maybe it's true. I think we were the outside guys who were the stand-in representatives of this thing that, as Alan just described, created an impossible challenge, an impossible task for you guys. As we all know, and a lot of people listening to this probably know, it's a fucking huge challenge just to make any fucking movie.
Oh yeah.
And then they're telling you, take this movie from, New England and make it that plays on customs and cultures and vernacular of New England. And you're just going to make it in Richmond, Virginia. And it's going to work great and be totally like the South. And people in the South are going to love it. And people in New England are going to love it. And people in the rest of the USA and the world are all going to love it.
Sure.
Okay. How's that? We were like the living embodiment of everything that was wrong in your professional lives. So I don't know that I would have, but whatever. I'm just saying, I think I just say you can understand why, from our perspective, as those outsiders.
Totally from your perspective, but
yes.
Totally from your perspective. But I can tell you, I don't think we would have thought 10 seconds if you guys or someone said to us, they want to come to the set. I don't think I would have said, what? No, they're not coming to the set. It's not
Gil,
their set.
it's okay. We went to the set. Yeah. We got insulted by Bill Sadler. It was all
There you go. See, we wouldn't have insulted you.
So had you come to the set, Alan and I would have insulted you probably better than Bill Sadler. And just one last thing on this. You guys all talked about getting fired. I never got fired from this show, but I had a big fight with Joel Silver, and we never spoke a day after that big fight. And we never worked again after that big fight. And that's after like 13 years of making a lot of movies, a lot of television, a lot of stuff. And
how long did you keep working on the show after you had the big fight with him?
Oh no, you're saying
no. After we had the fight, we never spoke again.
Right.
I never worked on the show again.
It was years after the show. The show had finished. I no longer worked with the people. Gil continued to. He did a bunch of movies under the Dark Castle banner with.
With Joel's genre label.
And then Joel wanted Gil to continue to work making Dark Castle movies, and Warner Brothers, was saying, "Hey, come and make tentpole movies." And I don't know, the tentpole movies sounded better, right, Gil?
Yeah. And so I went to Joel's. I was in Australia finishing up Ghost Ship, and I said I got a phone call from Lorenzo saying, "When you come back, I'm going to send you 3 scripts. Tell me which one you want to do. That's your next movie." And I was like, "Whoa, wow, thank you, Lorenzo." I mean, yeah, sure. Send me the scripts. I'm going to Tahiti for a week. That's okay. Go to Tahiti, read the scripts. Call me when you get back. 10 minutes after that conversation, Joel calls me, and he's very, very smooth. Hey, how are you? What are you doing? And I go, "Hey, what's going on?" "We're finished. I'm going to Tahiti. You know that. I'm going to be back in a week." "No, I know. I want to send you this script. I have our next script. It's called Gothica." And I said, "Joel, I just got this call from Lorenzo, and we had this big argument from the long distance in Australia." And I said, "Joel, I'm going to be back in a week. I'll come in. We'll sit. We'll talk. We'll figure this out. But I'm not doing another little picture." And I hung up. So I go back to LA. I go to his office. I walk into the office, and he had the new office now because Donner had left, and they renovated Donner's thing. They spent $250,000 to renovate for Joel.
Okay.
I go into Joel's office. Joel's on a plane to New York. I go, "Oh, okay. Well, just tell him I'm back. And when he comes back, tell him if he wants to give me a call." I walk to my car, and the girl comes running out. Gil, come. I got Joel on the phone. He needs to talk to you right away. So I go into his office, this brand new office, and I sit down at his desk, and I pick up the phone, and I'm talking to him on the phone. And "You'll never work in this town again. I'll make sure no one ever hires you." Blah, 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 on and on. And I go, "Joel, this is Gil. Who are you talking to?" I go, "I know who I'm talking to, you little fucker. You're not making any movies for Warner Brothers. I'll make sure that never happens." So we got to the point. I said, "Look, Joel, don't give me an ultimatum. I don't do well with ultimatums. You know that. We've been there before. And he goes, I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I'm just saying you'll never work in this town again if you don't make this picture. And I said, listen, Joel, I'm going to hang up on you if you don't stop it. And he just kept running, screaming at me. And I took the phone and I slammed it down really, really hard. And I thought I broke my hand, but I broke the phone. I literally broke his new phone. And I left there, and then we never spoke again.
Wow.
The next time I ran into Joel, I was on the stages for Superman with Bryan Singer. We were doing some sound work, and it was like the scene out of The Sting. Bryan and I are walking this way, and Joel and the guy from Gothica, the director, are walking this way, and we stop. And Bryan had made a deal with Joel to do some remake of some movie, so he knew Joel. So Bryan and they start talking, and Bryan goes, and Joel, you know Gil Adler, right? And there's like, and I said to him on the phone, I'll never speak to you again. So Joel looks at me and he goes, hey, yeah, of course I know him. Of course, we made a lot of stuff together. How you doing? And I just looked at him and went, and then they continued walking this way. We continue walking that way. I walked like 10 steps, and Bryan Singer stops me and he goes, oh my God, holy shit, what did I just do? Of course you know Joel. You made so many fucking movies with him. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. There's nothing there anymore. But we've never spoken since.
Ethan, did you run into Joel Silver at some?
Just because his one of his, I don't know, I guess maybe his son went to school at the school where my kids went to school, and we were going to some parent event, and I just said hello and told him, reminding him about Demon Night, and he was friendly and gracious, and blah blah blah, whatever. It was fun.
Guys,
but I have to say,
carry on,
Gil. So you've actually had someone say to you, literally, "You'll never work in this town."
Oh yeah,
there you go.
That's such a classic Hollywood,
Oh yeah, I mean, at the time,
cliche.
to just give you some context, I mean, I was trembling in his office. I was sitting there. I was so mad, and I was also so frightened. I was like, could he really do this? I mean, after Lorenzo called me and said this, can he really tell Lorenzo? And of course, it worked out okay for me.
Yeah.
And I've always felt badly that it ended with Joel that way, because, we made a lot of stuff together. We had a lot of, our whole relationship was argumentative and confrontational and not friendly. With all the work we did, all the stuff we created, it was never there was never a friendship there. There was always a very hard-edged business relationship. And once in a while, when it would pierce that veil and get to talk about personal lives or personal feelings or something, it would last for, a couple of hours, and then right back to wham in my face.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood. That's Hollywood, Gil.
Yeah, I suppose.
I'd love to talk some more about relationships, and the fact that you guys have maintained your relationship as long as you have, but we've been talking for 2 hours, and so I would love to have you guys back. We would love to have you guys back to talk about creative relationships, because really one of the things that we do on our podcast is we like to mentor, and so how to maintain a creative relationship, it's hard. It's a marriage.
And you've also had a very successful career that we never got to, that we'd like to talk about.
Absolutely, positively. So we've been talking for 2 hours, and we have scratched the surface of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. But I think more importantly, I think there is some, I would refer to as documentary, the conversation we had about Demon Night, because in terms of telling the story of a very successful piece of Hollywood horror, really, we had never had this conversation about this part of the story. Nobody had. And it's a very important part of the story, because it's how it got created and how the creators bumped heads unnecessarily.
Yeah. I mean, if we did have another or if we do pick up this conversation talking about the rest of Cy and my career in movies and television, I wouldn't I mean, it was a momentous and like profound experience for us very much at the time, but it didn't end up being the worst experience of our writer or executive producer careers. In fact, probably it's pretty far down on that. I mean, it's still in the top, 10 or top half a dozen, but it's not number one with a bullet or number two.
Well, we're grateful. We're grateful for that.
I mean, you've worked on so many cool projects that I'd love to talk about. From Brimstone, Sleeper Cell, 11th Hour, Kung Fu Panda, Bulletproof Monk, Nightfall, and Bard of Blood sounds really interesting.
So I think
really interesting. And
India,
to have a conversation.
India, maybe. Look, get us back. We'll do another ride with you guys. If you're into it, sure.
So this is but part one of this conversation. Thank you so much for sitting in on part one of this conversation. This was more detailed than I had hoped that we do. This was fantastic. Thank you so much. We will continue this conversation, and thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.